Greetings to you all, televiewers of Divine Mercy Radio Television, and welcome to another interesting session of our weekly and regular program over the Divine Mercy Radio Television, which comes to you every Saturday from 9 p.m. captioned debate over the Divine Mercy Radio Television, which is meant to be, of course, a very teaching, researched, learning, and of course, an appetite, intellectual winning and whipping experience over the Divine Mercy Radio Television, where our panelists often deliberate in a pattern of a debate with regard to a particular motion or caption. It is often a very, captivating period for the audience of Divine Mercy Radio Television. No one affords to miss this opportunity, and that is why you can be rest assured that I am on track, saying that you are already seated and glued to your television screens to be fed or nourished with regard to what is making, the debate line, the debate topic, the point of deliberations tonight. And so we are bringing to you another session of debate, today being Saturday the 28th of June 2025. Here in the Diocese of Boya, the Christian community is happy. The Christian faithful are joyous, cognizant that we have some servants who have been ordained to the order of the diaconate today by His Lordship Bishop Michael Bibi, Bishop of the Diocese of Boya. So there is rejoicing in the party. That notwithstanding, after that, great momentous celebration, some of the seminarians who answered present decided to equally answer present here over the Divine Mercy Radio Television, respective of the festivities, the feasting, and the rest, to actually equip us intellectually tonight with regard to our debate topic. Much ado about nothing, I have the honor most respectfully to unfold to you our debate topic for tonight. Man is culture and culture is man. It has been the preoccupation of philosophers, anthropologists, and so many to actually define who man is, what occupies man, and what his primary occupation regard to his ecological niche, where he's found and what he does. That has been the primary occupation of some philosophers and anthropologists. And it has been purported by so many scholars and Africans that the African man is a man of culture. It is on this count and base that we are presenting to you the debate topic for tonight. Man is culture and culture is man. How far is this assertion true? Does it hold water? We are going to know as the debate unfolds. I would like to introduce to you the gentlemen who occupy the panel for tonight's debate. Those by my left, Rene Promise. Good evening to you, Rene. How are you doing today? Happy to have you here. Thank you very much, Rene. Rene is a seminarian for the Diocese of Boya. And he will be flanked on the same pattern of arguments with Gaius Ejizre. Good evening to you, Gaius.
Good evening, Father.
And how are you doing tonight?
I'm fine, Father. Thank you.
Happy to have you here.
Thank
you so much. So, Rene and Gaius will be arguing for the motion that man is culture and culture is man. And by my right, we have equally two seminarians, Antonio Atemafe. Good evening to you, Antonio.
Good evening, Father.
And how are you doing tonight?
I'm well, Father. Thank you.
It's a pleasure having you again here.
Same here, Father.
Thank you so much. That's Antonio. And we have Roland. Roland. Good evening to you, Roland.
Good evening, Father.
And how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing very fine, thank you.
It's a pleasure to have you here.
Yeah, thank you.
So these are all seminarians of the Diocese of Boya. Of course, I call them the philosopher kings, cooked in a well-refined oven, the formation house, highly esteemed in ecclesiastical province of Bamenda, of course, with the philosophy compound at St. John Paul II Major Seminary Bachunta. And we are so happy to have them. They shall be bringing to us a word of knowledge with regard to man and the culture. So without wasting much time, we go into the crux of the matter. Man is culture and culture is man. We give the floor to the first speaker for the motion. Rene Promise, who will be telling us in a very promising way, man being culture and culture being man. The floor is yours, Rene.
Thank you, Father. Greetings, dear televiewers. I stand for the motion that man is culture and culture is man. To begin, I would like to acknowledge the efforts put in place by the debate and symposium team of Sadio Palms. for doing this research, and we see that there are two main points here: man and culture. And I'm going to define these terminologies. First, culture. Culture, according to Edward Taylor, is a complex whole which constitutes knowledge, beliefs, morals, and customs acquired by man as a member of society. Clifford Geertz views culture as the total way of life of a people. Etymologically, culture comes from the Latin word colere, which means to cultivate, and from the Greek word politeo, which means to live in a city. From all this, we see that culture is not just an external or not just an accident to man, but an internal and a substantial part of man. And it also shows us that it has an intricate relationship with man, because culture and man are intricately linked together. Culture shapes human behavior and identity, while man in turn creates and shapes culture through their interactions and experiences. The interdependence of culture and man's existence highlights the fact that culture is not just an external factor of man, but an integral part of man. Therefore, it can be stated that man is culture and culture is man. Now we have gotten the definition of culture. We now move to the definition of man. From the Aristotelian term Homo sapien, we get to understand that man is a rational and social being. Socrates will say that man is a thinking being. From this, it is clear that culture is man and man is culture, in the sense that in the creation of culture, man uses his most powerful purpose, which is reasoning, and we see that culture is the fulfillment of man in his purpose. I'm going to base my argument based on using two points, that is language and the story of man. We see that language is a very strong point when it concerns man. Language is a means through which man reveals himself to others. Language gives meaning to man. Language is learned thanks to culture. One cannot express himself out of culture. There is no culture without a language, and no language without a culture. So it can be said that all languages are cultural, and all cultures are communicable. Man cannot relate with others without language, and this language is found only in culture. Therefore, since language, which is so intrinsically linked to man, cannot be separated from him, is so cultural. Therefore, let us now see that if language is coming from culture, what more of culture, which is the main cause, which is the main effect of the cause. Therefore, it is clear that from Batista Mondin, when he says that man is a cultural being who lives in a culture and this culture shapes him into his ideal form, he has said extensively that man is culture and culture is man. Language is formed and communicated following a certain culture. This language, which is inseparable to man, is formed by culture, and we know that the effect cannot be greater than the cause. If the effect is greater than the cause, nothing can happen. That will lead to an erroneous belief. The secondary effect, which is language, cannot communicate more to the first cause than the first effect. Language is the product of culture, and language cannot relate more to human being than culture, which is the first effect. Therefore, it can be convincingly said that man is culture and culture is man. Moving to the second part of my points here, which is the story of man, we see that the story of man cannot be expressed without his culture. You cannot understand a particular people without understanding first their culture. You cannot explain a people without explaining their culture. So the culture and the story of man are intrinsically linked together. In his book Black Skin, White Marks, Frank Fanon asserts that to speak is to be in a position to assume a culture. So from all this, we see that culture is man and man is culture. But let us come to think of it. Even the story of man is cultural. Even the story of man is cultural. We know that man cannot do without a culture, and that man's story can only be found in a culture. Human life is unthinkable without a story, and the story of man cannot be separated from his culture. Man cannot be separated from his culture in which he is born. the culture in which he lives and the culture in which he dies. And we see that when man is born into a particular culture, man grows into a particular culture, man dies in a particular culture, and is buried according to a particular culture. And even when he lives this life, he's drifted into a heavenly culture. So we see that everywhere man goes, there's a culture there. So it can be said convincingly that man is culture and culture is man. Even Bernard Fonlaw avows that man is born into a culture, and whatever humans do and will be is as a result of culture. Man finds fulfillment only in culture. Now, we as rational animals, we can clearly see that no one can refuse the fact that man has been shaped by culture. Or is there any person who can say that man has not been shaped by culture? Or is there any person on earth who does not live in a particular culture? Even if you say you want to change your culture and go to another culture, the other culture that you are going into is a particular culture in which you will still adapt into it, and you find yourself living according to that culture, and the culture will shape you and you tend to live according to that culture. Thus, I convincingly still stand on the motion that man is culture and culture is man. Thank you.
Man is culture and culture is man. Yes, that was Rene Promise who gave the first argument for the motion, hinging his argument on two facets or points of view. Firstly, on language, and secondly, on the story of man. That no language can exist without man, and no man can exist without language, with inference and reference from Baptiste Mundine. And he equally went to match his argument on the fact that the story of man in and by itself is indicative and clearly indicative that man is rooted in culture and culture is rooted in man. Thus, man is culture and culture is man. That was Rene Promise who actually laid down that first argument to prove that culture is man and man is culture. Let us take you to the first speaker against the motion for tonight's debate, Antonio Ate Mafe.
Dear televiewers, dear critical listeners, it is absurd to say with conviction that man is culture and culture is man. This assertion of Baptiste Mundine raises concerns and contradictions. In order to critically examine Mundine's position on this, I will highlight 2 points from which I'm going to build the strength of my arguments. That is, cultural languages as causes of division and story as a catalyst of destruction in man's world. Before that, there are a number of things my learned opponent said which I disagree with, but for want of time, I will pick on 2. Quoting Kemlin, you define culture as that which man does to thrive and not merely to survive. The underlying factor here is everything man does and not everything culture does. Can culture do anything without man? You said language is so important to man such that the distortion of man's language is the distortion of man's being. Really? I disagree. What about those who used to speak English and now speak French fluently? Their language has been distorted, yet their being, which is man, remains central to them. What about a man who speaks many languages? Is his being distorted by the many languages he speaks, as you suppose? I think our late Pope Benedict XVI spoke as many as 5 different languages, yet his being man was central to him. Proceeding to my arguments. First, from the point of view of cultural languages as causes of division, we see that cultural languages breed cultural exclusivism. People don't admit others into their circles if they cannot speak the same language. This suggests that man is defined by culture. Franz Fanon, the social anthropologist, in his book The Wretched of the Earth, he says, and I quote, "National cultures and consciousness are essential for the colonized people to reclaim their identity and resist oppression," end of quotes. Hence, language is not a sole determinant of the human nature. It is just a tool for self-definition and identification. Language to an extent can be very misleading and mischievous. The conspiracy of language is one of the greatest conspiracies in the world. It has hindered man's progress. People are considered less human because of their inability to speak their cultural language. Should this really be the case? These same cultural languages have promoted tribalism and bias. The conservative nature of culture is contrary to Mundine's position that man is culture and culture is man. There are people who are strict conservatives. They uphold cultural tenets so that at times it is at the expense of human life. It is worth noting that the dictatorship of cultural relativism is one of the greatest dictatorships in the world. Yet the idea of man is universal and expresses a complete thought. Suppose somebody should enter your house and mention culture. You will not understand what the person is meaning. You have to think, what sort of culture is this person talking about? Is he talking about a Christian culture? Is he talking about a backward culture? But suppose the person enters your house and mentions man. You will not help it but think of the fact that man is a rational animal with reason and intellect. Man expresses a complete thought. Culture does not. We cannot equate that which does not express a complete thought to man which expresses a complete thought. From the metaphysical principle of cause and effect, we see that the statement man is culture and culture is man cannot be used interchangeably. The effect, as my learned opponent rightly said, cannot be greater than the cause. Culture, the effect of man's action, cannot be greater than man or even equal to man, who is the cause of culture. Culture depends on man. It puts opposite the metaphysical dominance of man, the independent, over culture, which is contingent. Love is a universal language of humanity. This love was shown to us by God who became man in Jesus of Nazareth. Yes, the mystery of incarnation took place within a culture, but it was to transcend that culture, introducing the civilization of love. Man is supracultural, just as the gospel is supracultural. Secondly, from the point of view of story as a catalyst of destruction in man's world, we see that Pierre Bayle, the French philosopher, says, and I quote, "The whole aspect of story and history is merely recounting man's miseries." Yes, these very stories in some cultures remind us of the pains, miseries, and ruins caused by yet another culture, like cases of slave trade, wars, and intimidation. Man has a story, very true. Man's story is identical to him, another truth. It shapes man, very true. That is why, as Christians, during the Easter Triduum, Holy Saturday to be precise, our Christian story of salvation is recalled to us in the readings. However, man's story is just a part of his history, his being, and civilization. Still in our story, we find typical concepts like the concept of the supreme. Worthy of note here is the fact that our notion of God, especially as Africans, is not as a product of our cultures, but through the recognition of a transcendent reality which surpasses our cultural differences. John B.T., the African philosopher, in his book, The Concept of God in Africa, posits, the African concept of God is not a product of a human culture, but rather through the recognition of a transcendent reality which surpasses the human culture. End of quote. This recognition of a transcendent reality confirms that man cannot be defined by his story. Man is connected to a broader universal reality where his story is one of the many accidents surrounding man's universal reality. The assertion of Munzin, man is culture and culture is man, immediately goes against the logical principle of identity, which confirms that no two things are the same. Yes, televiewers, no two things are the same. Not even our so-called notion of identical twins. Not even man and culture. Mundin holds that it is impossible for the human being to exist without a culture. I doubt. On the contrary, Bernard Fanon, the Cameroonian philosopher, in his book, The Problem of the Relationship Between Man and Culture, says, and I quote, "Man does not justify himself with culture. He is also a rational being, a being endowed with reason and intellect." End of quote. Accent is placed on man's rational intellectual faculties as that which transcend cultural differences. Despite the fact that man practices culture and shapes it, the two can never mean the same or be of equal status. Man and culture can never be equated, not even with the use of the logical copula is. As this debate topic suggests, man is culture and culture is man. It would be like a child comparing himself with his father simply because his father gave him the leftovers in his plate. The fact that he was opportune to eat his father's leftovers does not give him equal status with his father. The father man has taken culture, baptized it, and given it meaning, shapes it, does not mean that culture can compare itself with man. Because without man, there will never be a culture. And even when we meet in our cultural gatherings, it is man who organizes such cultural gatherings. It is man who fans flames to these cultural gatherings. And so there is no way that we can equate culture and man. This said, I confirm my convictions against the motion that man is culture and culture is man. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. And that was Antonio who actually presented arguments against the motion for tonight's debate. That, of course, according to him, man can never be culture and culture can never be man. That is absurd to say that man is culture and culture is man. Man expresses a complete thought and language and culture in itself, which could be expressed in language and so other forms, cannot really express a complete thought. Thus, man cannot be equated with a culture, and that this cannot be justified to say that man is culture and culture is man. Even citing the famous Bernard Fallon and other great authors. That was the argument from Antonio, who argued that man is not culture and culture is not man. JTV friend, if you are just joining us, you are on to the program Debate over the Divine Mercy Radio Television. And like I earlier mentioned, it's an exercise to whip up our intellectual know-how, to whip up our research abilities and skills, to be critical, to be creative, to analyze and to comprehend that which is passed across, and that can be of benefit to us, to better our lives, to better our society, and to better our commitment and attachment to God. And so, I know the temperature is gradually increasing with the atmosphere of the debate. You can always reach us with the numbers projected on your television screens. We have listened keenly to Rene Promise and Antonio Atemefe. Thank you so much. It has been so wonderful. At this point in time, we shall take the second set of debaters and we shall hear more about the arguments they are to Masha. Man is culture and culture is man. That will be a proposition that will be held in the course of his argument by Gaius Gisrael. Gaius, over to you.
Good evening, dear televiewers. Permit me to differ with my opponents. Man is culture and culture is man, cried the philosophical anthropologist Batista Munzin. By this, man depends solely on his culture to determine his way of life, his way of living, how he interacts with people in the community. We may have noticed that sometimes when someone is confusing, he may be mistaken to be learned. I will base my arguments on two major points, that is, on education and religion. My learned opponent, you mentioned that culture is a source of tribalism. So are you therefore saying that when NGOs attend to the needs of other countries, are they being tribalistic? However, wherever man finds himself, there is a value, a belief, and a tradition, and wherever there is culture, man is at the center of this. Culture is the major source of man's education, and thus every culture carries a certain rationality. Plato in his Meno says that to know is to do. Whenever man is conscious about something, he can do it well. Man is a rational animal, said St. Thomas Aquinas in his Summa Theologiae. Through this, man is able to know and reproduce what he has known. Paulo Freire, in his Pedagogy of the Oppressed, sees culture as a constant unveiling of reality. Man's way of life, well-being, and morals are a product of culture. That is why, in the last debate held on December 28, 2024, we came to a conclusion that morals are relative and dependent on cultures. As a result of this, man is unable to comprehend those concepts out of his culture. Man is a cultural being. Man is an artifact of culture, and he is held as the prime receiver and the greatest effects of culture. Every culture has its way of education. Thus, the educational system of a particular culture is peculiar to that culture. That is why the French system of education is so different from the English system of education. Likewise, that of America and Cameroon. Education is not just about knowledge, but it is about molding an individual to fit into a particular culture. Thus, Walter Rodney, in his book How Europe Undeveloped Africa, will lament, saying, "Colonial education is education for subordination, exploitation, and creation of mental confusion. As such, cultural education stands as the best source of education. A child raised in Japan learns discipline and honor, and a child raised in Africa learns respect for elders and the value of community living." The second point will be based on religion. Culture and religion are inseparable. One of the values of every culture is religion, and the religion of every culture gives man a certain identity and mood of being in that culture. Religion comes from the Latin word religare, which means to bind. It is the binding of the supreme. It is a binding to the supreme. This binding is different to every culture. Philippe Kotak, in his book Exploitation of Human Dignity, of Human Diversity, states that religion is part of culture, and culture. In his book Exploitation of Human Diversity, Philippe Kotak states that religion is part of culture, and cultural differences shows up systematically in religion. For this reason, we need the original Hebrew text to better understand scripture. Jesus Christ was informed when he was teaching the people that his mother and brothers were looking for him. From my opponent's argument, does it mean that Mary had other biological children? No. Hinduism goes with Indian culture, and Islam goes with the Arabian culture. Inferring from this, we cannot but conclude that culture permeates all spheres. Thus, man comes to know his inner self within a particular culture. Consequently, it is culture that shapes the being of man, since religion cannot be understood outside of culture. Hence, culture shapes how man worships and relates with God. The African philosopher John Samuel Beatty states that Africans are notoriously religious. This religiosity is inherent in man and builds in him a certain spirituality. Man knows God through his culture, but can he worship God outside his culture? I think the answer is no. Can he really relate with him outside culture? The answer is still no. The anthropologist Hilia Belloc opines that culture has a religious dimension as the way individuals relate to the divine. Without culture, man is unable to relate with the divine. Culture connects man to his creator. Man's growth and development are objectively in culture. With this, we see that man is culture because only through culture can man best relate with his God. From this point of view, I maintain my stance that man is culture and culture is man.
Thank you. That was Gaius Gisrael, who actually argued that man is culture and culture is man. And he noted that culture permeates every living person. Culture permeates humanity, and culture permeates the human race, and the human person is shaped by a culture. And without culture, man cannot relate to the ultimate being God, and thus will be limited. There will be some accidental mishaps in the course of his interaction with his ultimate. And on all these premises and aforementioned propositions, he has said that man is culture and the culture is man. What about you listening to us over there? What about you glued to your television screens now, very much poised, which I know very well that you are poised to pick up your phones and give a text message regardless to your own point of view. Do not hesitate, because it will be welcomed with all decorum and with all due respect. And this time around, we shall be taking you to the second speaker against the motion, who will be telling us that man is not culture and culture is not man. Before he speaks, let us therefore be glued and keen and attentive to what he's got for us. Roland, down to you. The floor is yours.
Good evening, dear televiewers. How can my learned colleagues stand for the motion that man is culture and culture is man? Cognizance of the limitedness of cultural rights, which are in itself hindrances to man's free will, talk less of the illusion of cultural worth and inhumane aspects of funeral rites. I wish to ask, if you say culture is man and man is culture, then culture is in itself lacking. Then do you mean to say man is lacking because culture is lacking? And if you say culture is lacking, do you mean to say man is lacking? And if you say man is lacking, then do you mean to say his creator is lacking? The answer is living in all men. While culture undoubtedly plays a significant role in shaping our identities and societies, I firmly argue that this notion oversimplifies the complex relationship between man and culture. In this argument, I will present evidence and arguments that demonstrate the limitedness of cultural rights, the hindrance to man's free will, and the promotion of relativism, ultimately concluding that man cannot be reduced to culture. Firstly, the limitedness of cultural rights. Cultural rights are often presented as absolute and unchanging, but in reality, they are subject to interpretation and variation. For instance, the practice of bride price is not a uniform practice across cultures, and its significance can be interpreted in different ways. This highlights the complexity of cultural rights and challenges the idea that they can define the essence of man. Furthermore, cultural rights can be limiting, dictating how individuals should behave, think, and feel without regard for personal autonomy or creativity. Secondly, cultural rights as a hindrance to man's free will. The emphasis on cultural rights can lead to a sense of obligation, stifling personal autonomy and individuality. When individuals conform to cultural practices out of obligation rather than conviction, they sacrifice their freedom and creativity. This is evident in the way some individuals participate in cultural practices without questioning or critically evaluating their significance. You see a man when he has misfortunes and the culture states that he needs to go back to the village to do some 1 or 2 sacrifices. He does not even go back to think that maybe it's not programmed well, it's not planned well. But then, because the culture demands that he goes back to the village and do these things, he goes without even thinking, without even making an assessment of what he was doing. By prioritizing cultural demands over personal autonomy, we risk stifling individuality and creativity. Thirdly, cultural relativism and the challenge of diverse values. Cultural relativism poses significant challenges in today's diverse societies. When individuals from different cultural backgrounds come together, they must navigate complex and cultural differences. This can lead to conflicts and challenge in reconciling cultural practices, highlighting the limitations of cultural relativism. As Git Clifford notes, cultures have different values, beliefs, and practices which can limit our understanding of the world. This emphasizes the importance of recognizing the complexity of cultural differences and the need for nuanced understanding. Fourthly, the illusion of cultural worth. The notion that cultural status or titles determine manhood is a fallacy that must be laid bare. Human dignity is not something that can be given or taken away by social status or cultural practices. As Kwasi Weridu argues, human dignity is not something that can be given or taken away by social status or cultural practices. This emphasizes the importance of recognizing the inherent worth and dignity of every individual, regardless of cultural background. Fifthly, inhumane aspects of funeral rites. These certain cultural practices, such as exhuming corpses, can compromise human dignity and worth. This raises questions about the extent to which cultural practices should be prioritized over human dignity and respect. As Emmanuel Levinas notes, the face of the other imposes a moral obligation as it is to respect and perfect their dignity. This highlights the importance of prioritizing human dignity and worth over cultural practices that may compromise them. Cultural evolution and change cannot be left untouched. Cultures are not static. Cultures are not static entities. They evolve and they change over time. This dynamic nature of culture highlights the complexity of the relationship between man and culture. As societies and individuals adapt to new circumstances, cultural practices and values must also adapt. This challenges the idea that man is culture and culture is man, as it suggests that culture is subject to change and revision. The universality of human rights is also one of them. The universality of human rights emphasizes the inherent dignity and worth of every individual, regardless of cultural background. Human rights are not culturally relative, but rather are universal and inalienable. This underscores the importance of prioritizing human dignity and worth over cultural practices that may compromise them. As the Universal Declaration of Human Rights notes, all human beings are born free and equal in dignity and rights. In conclusion, the relationship between man and culture is complex and multifaceted. While culture plays a significant role in shaping our identities and societies, it is not to be the sole determinant of human worth and dignity. The limitedness of cultural rights, as mentioned, the hindrance to man's free will, the promotion of relativism, all demonstrate that man cannot be reduced to culture. Instead, we must recognize the inherent worth and dignity of every individual, regardless of cultural background, and prioritizing human rights and dignity over cultural practices that may compromise them. Ultimately, the notion that man is culture and culture is man is not tenable, and as such, I stand against such notion that man is culture and culture is man. Thank you.
Man is not culture and culture is not man. That was the concluding statement of Roland, who argued against the motion for tonight's debate, matching his argument alongside Antonio and in opposition to the assertions raised by Rene Promise and Gaius Gisrael, who argue for the motion that man is culture and culture is man. Dear TV friends, so far it has been wonderful. I know everybody is so much alert and Everybody is putting on their thinking caps to see that they get and they can equally chip in contributions regard to tonight's debate. Already I'm getting contributions coming in. Do not hesitate to send in your contributions for tonight's debate. From our philosopher kings, those who are deep in line and connection with the Socrates and the Platos of old. Culture is man and man is culture. That is our focal point and our principal point of debate for tonight. This point in time, we are going to put things together. We are going to take a very short break such that our debaters can put their points together, and we shall have each from the various panels to actually give their culminating argument to wrap up their arguments for tonight's debate, which is man is culture and culture is man. We shall have a short break and we shall be back in a bit. Welcome. It has been the preoccupation in the minds of the debaters to actually find out, and after finding out with research to actually disseminate to the assimilation of those listening to the debate program this night over the Divine Mercy Radio Television. Can only be Divine Mercy Radio Television sharing the light of hope, presenting to you debate every Saturday from 9 p.m. I know some of the fathers who are glued to their television screens and they cannot afford to lose a night in a week, Saturday, 9 a.m. because they know their debate is coming up and they wish to be nourished intellectually and otherwise. So far so good. The arguments have been so wonderful. Of course, for some, there is some cohesion in the room. For some, the room is filled with smoke as a result of the arguments. For some, it is better to withstand the smoke to counteract and to see how the smoke will be disappeared from the room of the argument. And to others, it's as though they should quit the scene. And others, it's like no retreat, no surrender. What about you? Perhaps it could be just a simple smile. Of course, admiring how far the arguments are unfolding. We shall take the culminating argument for tonight's debate, those for the motion that man is culture and culture is man. Renee, promise, the floor is yours once again.
Thank you very much, Father. Before I begin my ending argument, I would like to counteract my opponent. He made mention of the fact that that culture cannot exist without man. But don't you think man too cannot exist without a culture? Let's come to think of that. But we see, I'm going to base my arguments on 2 points, that is dressing and the food of man. We see that man expresses himself in culture through dressing. Jean Vanier puts it in his book Scandal of Service that clothing often signifies the position and the function of a person. For example, a priest or a doctor or a soldier will dress in a particular way, and that particular way will reveal the function of that person, the function of that priest, the function of that doctor. And with that dressing, we get to see that culture is in play in dressing. And man, from a man's dressing, one can know his orientation. This is so because clothes are cultural, and acceptance to a particular culture is shown in dressing. When one dresses in a particular way, it shows that he's accepted into this particular culture. The way a Bamenda man will dress out there makes one identifies him as a Bamenda man. the way a man will dress out there makes him very unique as a man. Even if one chooses to not to dress modernly but to dress not to dress locally but to dress modernly, he still assumes a Western culture, and that is still a culture. These all tell us that man is culture and culture is man. Culture influences human behavior and identity through dressing, and if something as dressing is so much linked to man cannot be separated from man, what more of culture in which dressing stems from? So let's come to think of that. Secondly, we have food. The food in which man eats makes him cultural. In what sense? A man will be linked more to his cultural, more to his traditional meal. A Bamenda man, when he serve kati will be very happy to see kati present in front of him, and we see that with that we see that culture is in play there. Culture is actually in play in food. Every culture has a traditional meal. People are so excited and filled with joy when they are served with their traditional meal. The food of people reflects their culture and identity. This shows that culture influences human behavior and identity through food. Food acts as a source of bond in social association. Therefore, if something so trivial as food, which stems from culture, can play such a great role in man's life, one more of culture itself, which produces which food stems from. And we see that the effect, I say again, cannot be greater than the cause. My learned colleague mentioned John Beatty, saying that man is notoriously religion, and we experience now in the Bamenda ecclesiastical province that the inculturation, the aspect of bringing in culture into the church. We see that the African man is more happy to worship God in his culture, and that is why cultures are brought into the church, so that man can better worship God. Man can be happy worshiping God when he is fulfilled and when he is free. And man and culture are interdependent with each other. Each of them influence each other, and they are complex and in dynamic ways. Culture cannot exist without man, I say again, and man cannot exist without a culture. There is no man who can live on this earth without a culture. Even if you live alone, you are living a solitude culture, and that is still a culture. So I strongly still stand on that fact that man is culture and culture is man. Thank you.
Man is culture and culture is man. Again, with his unwavering, decisive stance, he asserts that man is culture and culture is man. That was Rene Promise who gave the final argument, hitting the nail by the head, dotting the i's and catching the t's with regard to his point of argument and arguing for the motion for tonight's debate that man is culture and culture is man. Again, he actually used two concrete and very, very practical examples that is based on dressing and that which is consumed by man. Culture is your identity, and what you consume as food directs you as a person, he noted. That was a praxis from, a literal and concrete point of view. We shall equally take the dotting i's and catching t's argument coming from those against the motion to culminate their points for tonight. And the floor will be that of Antonio.
Thank you, moderator, for this opportunity once more to cement and concretize my arguments. The three offshoots of the Enlightenment were reason, progress, and technology. Let us examine this closely. But before that, like our venerable doctor of the church, St. Thomas Aquinas, always give respondeos to the objection raised. As a respondeo to the objection raised by my opponent, whom I still dare to call learned, whether a man can exist without a culture, I will put it to you. What about a child in the womb? What culture does it belong to, if I may ask? It pains me so much to counteract my opponent, but I have to. Like the moderator said some moments ago, The Church of Boya was graced today with the ordination of 7 deacons. I happened to partake in the reception of one of the deacons. I'm talking about food. There I saw people who dished corn fufu, added arrow, and they still threatened to add plantain and koki. And I asked myself, my opponent says, the food of a particular people gives them an identity. The man who takes corn fufu, I think it is particular to those of the Northwest. He still takes arrow like the people from the Southwest. Can we really identify him to a culture? This is just to confirm that food cannot really define man, because food cannot really define man, because food is now a misnomer, like the case I just mentioned where people mix dishes and so we cannot really identify them. But had it been the case where we see a man sticking to his arrow when he goes for occasions, we know that no, this man must be a Bayangi man. We see that this man has dignity for the food. Now, coming to food, I came across an important quote from an anonymous author which states, "Food is a suicide of reason. Thus, the need for fasting as a means of self-restraint." But what about fasting? In his autobiography, Mahatma Gandhi elucidates that fasting is efficacious in taming the will and the intellect. It builds self-discipline and mastery of one's appetite. The problem here is that man has often limited fasting to a merely religious observance. I differ against such limitations. Fasting is an instrument for self-denial, a weapon used to conquer the flesh. Let us not limit the benefits of fasting to the physical, for it ventures even to morals. Physical fasting goes as far as propelling mental fasting, and as long as fasting is accompanied with self-restraint, it can never be futile. In the words of Sir Tillanges, a genuine intellectual does not waste his time on digestion. Looking at my televiewers, the genuine intellectuals before me, I think they felt insulted when my opponent stressed the need for food, because our aim is not food, our essence is not food. Talking about clothing, the NOSO came to Cameroon some weeks ago. Now, in one of the activities commemorating the celebration of the 75th anniversary of the Diocese of Boya, the NOSO was dressed in a typical Bakweran regalia. I beg my pardon. And he was dressed in this regalia. Does it mean that he's from Boya, or does it mean that he's a Bakweran? He was dressed in this regalia, whereas he's a white. He's nowhere from Cameroon. So we cannot define man by culture, saying that when a man dresses, we can identify his being from such dressing. Like I said, the Noto was dressed like a Bakwere man, but the Noto is not a Bakwere man. He's not even from Cameroon, he's not even from Africa. So these dresses now are now conventional and no longer serve the purpose of identification that they should serve before. In the case where we see a man tying the sanja, we see the same man having the staff from a different culture, wearing the cap from a different culture. There is a mix-up. We find it difficult to identify where this man comes from. But as logic will tell us, as simple apprehension will tell us, when we see a man coming from afar, even before seeing the mix-up in the dresses he's wearing, we are able to decipher that this is a man coming. This shows that his being man is greater than any cultural attire. His being man is superior to any culture. Because first of all, even a naked child, we can see the child and we say that this is a human being. Whether he's wearing a dress or not, we see that his essence is a man. And so we cannot limit it, we cannot reduce it to a dress. Coming to our own example, even our clerics now, at times we may find a priest, it is very rare, but at times we may find a priest, he can be wearing the Roman collar shirt, identify himself with the Catholic culture, and we can still find every priest wearing the Bamenda fabric over the Roman collar shirt. What identity is he portraying? We cannot really decipher if he's from Bamenda or he's identifying himself as a priest. But yet, like I said, he is being a priest, which is central and cuts across the cultural differences, is superior to him. So we cannot be defining man by culture simply because of the dresses man wears, the food man eats. We cannot do like that. Even a typical man who has been groomed to eat corn fufu, if he should travel abroad today, he will accommodate himself to start eating what the people of let me say Canada they eat, because he has that ability to transcend and cope under all circumstances. And we cannot reduce man. Come on, man is bigger than what we think man is. That is why man is a mystery. And philosopher like the moderator said, even diviners, they have not really understood who man is. And sitting here and saying categorically that man is culture and culture is man, I think we should rather say man shapes culture, man participates in culture. But saying with a lot of conviction that man is culture and culture is man, I think it's a misnomer. That is why I will reclaim my stance against the motion that man is culture and culture is man. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And that was Roland, and that was Antonio arguing alongside Roland that man is not culture and culture is not man. Man cannot be limited to culture, and man remains a mystery. Even though Boisius noted man is an individual substance, the rational nature, man remains a mystery. He noted, and he says it will rather make much sense and hold much water and becomes more tenable to say that man shapes culture and not that man is culture, and that culture can equally shape man. That was the final argument from those against the motion. Antonio arguing alongside with Roland. As we equally heard the final arguments from Rene arguing alongside Gaius. So far so good. It has been wonderful. It has been so engaging. It has been so interesting. No, the appetite has been whet for those of you who actually had the yearning, like the deer that yearns for running streams. I know some of you, your souls have been yearning to get arguments for tonight's debate from these philosopher kings, steeped and rooted in the world of knowledge. We had two of our contributors who actually gave something very briefly. The first contribution came from Mr. Gabriel Tenga, who noted that I want to say my culture is in another way my person, and if I follow my culture, I become more of my person. Thus, according to Gabriel Atanga, culture is person, man is culture, and culture is man. That was his assertion. Very briefly, we equally had Madame Josiane, who equally wrote us, and she noted that greetings to everybody at the studio. It has been a wonderful one for tonight. I want to thank all the debaters for the wonderful input and for the very, very clear arguments. According to me, I want to say culture belongs to man and not the other way around. If she says culture belongs to man and not the other way around, it means that culture belongs to man and man is not culture. That is Madame Josiane. So far, these are the two persons. Yes, somebody is equally just writing us straight away. We hope to get you all. Unfortunately, we cannot get you. Unfortunately, as a result of some technical issues. Sorry. We do all the best we can to have you subsequently and to get your assertion. That is it with regard to tonight's debate about man and culture. Culture is man, and so far we had so much succinct arguments raised from the debaters for tonight's debate. We want to hail the efforts of all those who actually chip in their contributions, and especially for the panelists. Now the debates, of course, we know how a debate is culminated. We cannot go without getting maybe a few tips from the moderator with regard to the debate. First and foremost, I want to say the assertions were very, very clear. I want to hail the debaters, those for and against the motion, for actually mastering their arguments in clarity and simplicity, yet deep and very much profound. Thank you for that. It was wonderful. And again, the use of so many concrete life experiences was very, very apt, very, very much on point. I want to say that was wonderful and made it more comprehensible to our highly esteemed audience who claimed that they followed you very well. And the use of so many great figures equally shows your depth of research, that you actually went down into research, you did the research, and you had the material which you brought to the benefit of everybody listening to you across the globe. We remain grateful to you and we urge you to keep the spirit of research. Meanwhile, we equally want to note here, that with regard to the arguments, there wasn't any attack on individual personality, and no one actually went ad hominem and ad backroom. Just the points were targeted, and that suffices for a debate. And that is what gives the beauty of a debate. We say on the part of the debaters, it was 100%. Thus, they are held to actually keep the spirit up. We are trying to get some of the arguments coming from our televiewers before we draw the curtains for tonight's debate. But unfortunately, some technology is failing us here. That notwithstanding, we shall forge ahead. Again, we want to say that, yes, we equally had contemporary and, I can say, home authors, cognizant of the fact that we were talking about culture. The debaters went and mentioned most African authors and great figures. The famous John Beatty, the famous genuine intellectual of Cameroon, Bernard Forlon of blessed memory, and many others before going to the Western world, quoting Batista Mundin and the rest, which is very, very wonderful. In all this, we say it has been an enlivening evening. It has been a touching evening. It has been a reaching evening, an enriching evening. Briefly, yes, the church teaches, and without mincing words, that human beings have an inherent dignity which cannot be tampered with and which cannot be placed into a jeopardy, even when you have eyes tilted on a stereotype and fixed angle. Human dignity cannot be tampered with and cannot be put into a dignity. Meaning humans are humans, and regardless of their cultural background, they remain humans. The individual substance of a rational nature, and the madness in the man, as the philosophers kings will say, remain the madness in the man, and this proves the man to be the man and not the man to be the thing, perhaps the animal which is a goat or so. And so man remains man, and culture remains culture. But that notwithstanding, as one of the great debaters noted, culture can shape man, and of course man can as well shape his culture for the benefit for a good society. And so we want to hail all the debaters for tonight concerning this debate. Rene Promise, thanks a million. Gaius Gisrael, thanks 100-fold. Antonio Atemafe, thanks, and in fact, the ocean cannot actually accommodate sentiments of profound gratitude I have for you. And to Roland down to you. I don't know if I'm articulating well, but with time, I'm going to comprehend the name. I know you teach me very well. Thanks so much for being present and for answering the great call for this debate. I want to say you have enlivened souls, you have touched souls, you have actually transformed souls, and you are putting so many others to think. Dear televiewers, to those of you who actually just reached us recently, it's rather unfortunate that we cannot get your reply because of some technical issues. So we cannot get what you have as per your assertions. But that notwithstanding, thank you so much for the effort and the attempt to communicate to us that you were very, very much alert and interested to follow. And on this count, therefore, we want to say those who argued for the motion, Rene Promise and Gaius Gisrael, scored a 94% for tonight's debate, 94%. And those who argued against that man is not culture and culture is not man, actually Antonio Atemafe and Roland Downtio actually scored a 96% of the debate. According to our human reckoning, we could be wrong judgmentally, but with putting one or two things together, A and B, we came to that reasonable consensus. Rene Promise and Gaius Gisrael, 94%, arguing for the motion that man is culture and culture is man. And as per the everything put together, modality and logistics considered, Antonio and Roland, who argued against the motion that man is culture and culture is man, in other words, who argued against, therefore they argued that man is not culture and culture is not man, had a 96%. So thank you, dear debaters. I think we can clap for ourselves. All of us did exceedingly well. It was wonderful. We hail you, and we want to say, please do not hesitate to answer present whenever we seek your attention, cognizant of the fact that you've got a lot at your table, lots to do, work, some small time to rest after school. We are so much grateful that you could answer present here, and you could take the bull by the horns to nourish us intellectually. I want to say we are proud of the oven in which you are being baked, our highly esteemed matter, St. John Paul, Alma Mater, St. John Paul II Major Seminary, Bachontai, Manfe. Thank you so much, dear TV friends. We take another rendezvous for next week, same time, same TV station. General supervision and, of course, general supervision coordination came in from the station manager, Joyce Mbonga. And our broadcasters for tonight, we had a team of our broadcasters spearheaded by Betwell Kinge. And for our debaters tonight, we had Rene Gaius Antonio Roland. And I have been Reverend Father Martin J., the moderator for tonight's debate. God willing, next week is another rendezvous, same time, same TV station, same highly esteemed audience, that is you listening to us. And probably, God willing, perhaps same debaters for tonight. I don't know, but maybe hope to get them again subsequently. Thank you so much, and God bless you all, dear brothers. We take another rendezvous. Stay tuned to more interesting programs over the Divine Mercy Radio Television, sharing the light of hope. Happy New Week, or happy weekend to you all. Thank you.